It has been too long since my last episode of Weird NASCAR Rumors, so let's not waste any time jumping into the rumors from 2013. 2013 was a year of controversy. A lot of the rumors that went around the garage area were tied in some way to the fallout from the Spingate controversy, and a couple of those rumors will be discussed in this video. But I wanted to start out with a rumor that isn't totally related to that. In 2013, Kurt Busch was in his rebuild era and was leading Furniture Row to a breakout season, eventually scoring their first playoff spot as an organization. Other teams were taking notice and wanted to sign the 2004 champion, who at this point had really redeemed his image in the eyes of many in the sport. There was a brief rumor that Joe Gibbs Racing had tried to sign him, which would have put the Busch brothers on the same team, and would have been pretty cool in my opinion. But eventually, the Outlaw would sign with Stewart-Haas Racing, which had some controversy all to itself, and that led Furniture Row to search for a new driver. Before Martin Truex Jr. was eventually signed to drive the 78 car, there was another interesting name rumored to be headed out to Denver, and that was Juan Pablo Montoya. It was announced in August that Montoya would be leaving Ganassi's 42 car at the season's end, and he immediately became a highly sought-after free agent in both NASCAR and IndyCar, as he was a former Indy 500 winner and a kart champion. On the NASCAR side of things, Furniture Row became the team that was most connected to Montoya, and he even went out to visit their shop in Denver. Montoya was a veteran and probably would have brought a lot to the team, but Montoya said he just wanted to be in a winning car, and he didn't really care what series that winning car was in. He was also being hotly pursued by Andretti in IndyCar, with team owner Michael Andretti expressing a lot of enthusiasm about signing him. But in the end, he wouldn't sign with Furniture Row or Andretti, and instead, he would head back to IndyCar with Team Penske. Ultimately, it was probably the right call for him, as he would go on to win 4 races in 3 years there, including a second Indy 500 and a runner-up finish in points in 2015. I think that Furniture Row would have continued to grow and become successful if they had managed to sign Montoya, just maybe not at the astronomical rate of improvement that they had with Martin Truex Jr. from 2015 to 2018. Some other drivers that were considered for the 78 car were Ryan Newman, who we'll talk about a little bit later, and Ryan Blaney, both of whom would have been really interesting choices. But as we all know, it was Martin Truex Jr. who would eventually be signed to drive the 78 car, and he's actually going to be the subject of the next rumor, as in the fall of 2013, he was dealing with the brutal fallout of Spingate. I already said that Kurt Busch was briefly talked about for a ride at Joe Gibbs Racing. Well, in the aftermath of Spingate, there was a rumor that Truex and his sponsor NAPA could both be headed to a 4th JGR car. When NAPA announced that they would be terminating their sponsorship of the 56 car at the end of the season, it seemed pretty clear that their problem wasn't with Truex, it was with Michael Waltrip Racing. So it wasn't long before the rumors started that Truex would be headed to the long-awaited 4th Gibbs car with NAPA on the hood. In reality, it didn't seem that legitimate, and it may have just been a situation where there was a scramble to try and keep Truex and NAPA in the Toyota family. I mean, we were well into September at this point. Do you really think that JGR was going to be able to spin up a 4th team from scratch and have it ready to run competitively by February? It was a long shot. Obviously, this would have been the best opportunity that Truex had gotten to that point in his career, and it raises some interesting questions. Would we have seen the same level of success out of Truex in the second half of his career if he didn't have that stint with Furniture Row? I think that the answer is no. Truex was the definition of a late bloomer at the Cup Series level. That Hall of Fame potential was obviously there, but it needed to be unlocked, and I think that the pairing with Cole Pearn at Furniture Row played a big role in unlocking that potential. The third rumor in today's video is also tied to the Spingate fiasco, and it involves a fan favorite driver that was actually not even driving for Michael Waltrip Racing at the time, Jeff Burton. In the midst of all of the fallout from Richmond, Burton was a free agent, and it was already announced that Ryan Newman would be replacing him in the 31 car in 2014. He had been mentioned for rides at Tommy Baldwin Racing with support from RCR and the newly formed but ultimately short-lived Swan Racing. But Michael Waltrip Racing co-owner Rob Kaufman was apparently very unhappy with the situation following Richmond, and was reportedly considering making a clean break, pulling his money from MWR and starting fresh with his own Toyota-backed team, with Jeff Burton behind the wheel. It's hard to say whether this would have worked out well for Burton, though Kaufman has become something of a controversial figure in NASCAR, having held stakes in Michael Waltrip Racing and Chip Ganassi Racing over the years, and up until recently leading the Race Teams Alliance. He has never been the face of an organization's ownership. How would he have led the team without someone like Michael Waltrip or Chip Ganassi? I don't know, but I do think that Burton probably would have been better off in a Rob Kaufman-owned Toyota than he would have been with a lower budget team like Tommy Baldwin Racing or Swan. Those involved with the situation denied that there was any truth to the potential ownership split at MWR. But the interest in Jeff Burton was real, and in December it was announced that he had signed to drive for the team on a part-time schedule in 2014, while working in the broadcast booth with NBC for the second half of the season. No set number of races was announced at the time, but I do think that it was intended that it would be more than the 2 races that he actually did end up running in the number 66 Toyota. He ran at Las Vegas and New Hampshire for the team, finishing 17th and 20th respectively. He then rounded out his Cup Series career with 2 final starts at Michigan and Bristol, filling in for Tony Stewart in the 14 car. Alright, I want to do one more rumor and then we'll get to rapid fire. And I've got a lot of fun ones in rapid fire today, but this last one is fun too. Let's talk about the potential of Ryan Newman returning to the 12 car for Penske. Newman was one of the biggest names on the silly season market in 2013, after losing his ride with SHR in a way that still bothers me a little today. As mentioned earlier, he was briefly talked about for the 78 car at Furniture Row, but one other possibility that was briefly thrown around was that he may end up returning to Penske to once again drive the 12 car. Penske was a 2-car team at this point, fielding the 2 and 22 cars, but had been keen on the idea of bringing the 12 car back. Penske had actually talked about putting something together for Newman a year earlier, but couldn't find the sponsorship to make it happen, and Newman would go on to sign a 1-year extension with SHR. But everyone kind of knew that the 1-year extension would be his last with SHR, and in January of 2013, the idea of Newman heading back to Penske and taking his sponsor Quicken Loans with him resurfaced. I personally would have loved to see it, but Roger Penske expressed loyalty to Sam Hornish Jr. and said in January that if a 3rd car did come to fruition, Hornish would be the first choice. That didn't stop Carl Edwards' name from being floated around as a potential fit for a Quicken Loans sponsored 12 car later in the year. Actually, Edwards had been rumored to head to Penske's 22 car the year before, and I covered that story in Weird NASCAR Rumors 2012, so go check out that video if you haven't seen it yet. Still, when those Edwards rumors resurfaced in June of 2013, Roger Penske firmly denied them, and again expressed his preference for Sam Hornish Jr. I would have really liked seeing Ryan Newman return to Team Penske after his time at SHR. I think that the Rocket Man still had more left in the tank than we got to see out of him during his later years at RCR and Roush. Yes, he did nearly win the 2014 championship with RCR, finishing second to his replacement, Kevin Harvick. But he didn't win a race that year, and that near championship was really just a product of a fundamentally flawed and luckily no longer existent playoff system. After leaving SHR, Newman would only win one more race in his career, but if he had returned to Penske, I think he would have been in better equipment and would have seen more than just one win. Okay, let's finish up with some rapid fire. Dodge was rumored to be pursuing a deal with Richard Childress Racing to come back into NASCAR. We talked about Dodge's attempts to stay in NASCAR with Furniture Row and Andretti in Weird NASCAR Rumors 2012, but those were obviously unsuccessful. Going after RCR was a bold move that made some sense on the one hand because RCR was certainly below Hendrick Motorsports and falling behind Stewart-Haas Racing in the Chevy pecking order. But on the other hand, Can any of us really imagine Richard Childress running cars with a manufacturer other than Chevy? In May of 2013, Tony Kanaan won the Indy 500, and by September, there was talk that he was going to be heading to NASCAR and signing a development deal with Joe Gibbs Racing. The talk was that the Brazilian IndyCar star would be heading to JGR's O'Reilly, then Nationwide, team for the 2014 season as part of a NASCAR development deal. Obviously, we never got to see Tony Kanaan in NASCAR, but I think that would have been neat. There was also talk that John Menard was going to try and buy Earnhardt Ganassi Racing. John Menard is obviously the father of Paul Menard, who was sponsored by the family business throughout his career. At the time, Menard was with RCR, and there was talk that the plan may be for him to go to a better team, and that may have meant a family takeover of a team like Ganassi. Ultimately, the deal never happened, and Ganassi would hang around until taking a buyout from Trackhouse Racing in 2021. So, I know I've been away for a while. I've spent the last few months focusing on finishing up my last semester of grad school, and I can now officially say that my master's degree is complete. So, I hope to have a lot more time to work on this channel. The last couple of years have been pretty grueling between family responsibilities, work, and school, so hobbies like YouTube have needed to be set aside. But school is out, and I plan to make a lot more Weird NASCAR Rumors and Missed Opportunities videos. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and let me know what you think about these rumors and ones I may have missed in the comments. Have a great day.